أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. We start in the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. We bear witness there is no deity worthy worship except Allah. Praise and glory be to Him, and that Muhammad is the seal of His. May peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, his family, his companions, and those who followed his path until the day of judgment. I greet you with greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Of course, Assalamu alaikum, brother Asad Zaman. This is the A2Z show. This is Friday, the 20th of Rabi' al-Awwal, 1442, to the 6th of November, 2020. And we are on the lockdown in Britain again, up to for one whole month, up to I think the 2nd of December. And of course, I think the MEND started the Islamophobia Awareness Month, usually in November, and talking about it as well. I think the COVID lockdown and its effect. We might have to speak about sex and relationship education, early years foundation, 2 to 4 years old. And now on the European news, we might speak about France update, Turkey and France relationships, and maybe we can zoom a little bit on secularism and its definition and version, the Turkish secular system and French secular system and the British secular system. Austria updates maybe on this last terrorist attack. And the European Union has produced a report, I think in June 2020, about reports and what are these individuals who are involved and in those kind of terrorist attack attempt, or they did some of the things as well. On the world, the news, we have maybe America, United States election. We still start on 3rd of November, but up to now we haven't the final results. And then we look maybe to India and other places as well. Okay, brother Asad Zaman, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Right,
and one more thing I think we can finish off with is bonfire night, since you can hear
yes, because
fireworks still going off, and it was yesterday, and it would be interesting to know the history of bonfire night.
Right, okay, that's very nice. And bonfire night, or wake up the whole night, because that's what happened with bonfire night.
We'll finish off with the bonfire night.
Right, okay. All right, and okay, first of all, I think there was no Friday as such, because the congregation was suspended the Friday.
All the mosques closed. Yes, all the
mosques were closed, and some of them they did on Facebook, same thing, I think. I listened
like
to
they did before with the lockdown.
The White Man Road Mosque in London by Brother Ajmal Masroor. He talked about parental roles and responsibility, looking after the children. And I looked as well on Facebook on the Brother Tahir, I think, from Sheikh Tahir from Didsbury Mosque, talking about the character of Muslims and in this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic conditions, and how we should be reviewing and everything, especially our intentions and our prayers as well, how we do prayers. Of course, we spoke about prayers are part and parcel of our life, and supplication is an act of worship as well. It is worship as well. And he spoke about different occasions. We have the daily prayer, and we have the Friday prayer, and we have when the moon and the sun, I think, come together, therefore kusuf al-khusuf, we have that. And we have different occasions when we talk about prayers. But he said, I think we should always make sure that we renew our intention, and to make this prayer very, very important for us. And it was affect especially on our immune system, because if you pray to God, therefore you will not be afraid of what will fall on you because of the illness. And if you fear, usually diminish our immune system. So therefore the importance of prayer and supplications in the life of a believer. What do you say about this first point?
Yeah, I mean, stress, everybody knows or should know, has a very detrimental, negative impact on your health, mental health and physical health. And the beauty of Islam is that whatever difficulties we are going through, we have some very simple principles that help us to get through difficult times. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, that, tie the camel. In other words, do what you can to achieve what you want and then leave the rest to Allah. So it's always, we know what's causing our stress, our problem. And so we do all we can to resolve whatever issue we've got in the best possible way that we can, always asking ourselves, how would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expect me to resolve this particular issue? So being just to those others, if there are other people involved, and being just to yourself as well, adl. And then you say, tawakkal ala Allah. You see, you leave it to Allah then, because there's nothing else you can do about it. So long as you've done all you can and you've not just said, there's nothing I can do about this. So even though there is something you can do, so long as we don't have that attitude, so long as we do all we can to do that, then that's it, to resolve our problem. And when we do our salah, I mean, that, I don't know about yourself, I'm sure this happens to you, but certainly whatever stressful, difficult situation I'm in, once I've done my salah, and it's really important that we try to concentrate on our prayer during our salah, and we don't give ourselves a fixed amount of time.
We stopped there. I think there's something going on.
That it with devotion and sincerity. And when you do it with devotion and sincerity, and of course, it's important to understand what you're saying to Allah, because you are in communication with Allah. As-salatu mirajul mu'minun. The prayer is the miraj of the Muslim. And that means when we do our salah, we are in direct communication with Allah, as though we are in front of him. The miraj, where the Prophet ﷺ went on the miraj, he was directly in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so whenever we say Allahu Akbar and we start, that's it. We are in the presence of Allah. And therefore, our concentration should be maximum. And if it is absolute maximum, we rip out any other thoughts in our head and we concentrate on our relationship with Allah. When we do that in our prayer, and we are saying, we're praising Allah, and then we are saying, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. It is you we worship, it is you we ask for help. So whatever problem that we have, we are saying to Allah, I'm not going to ask anyone else. You are the one that can resolve my issues. You are the one who can solve my problems. And, I submit myself to you. I will do my best to follow your commands and be an obedient servant to you. And with that attitude of humility and surrendering yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as you go down for ruku and for sujood, and you are in the most humble of states, with your forehead, as one might say, in the presence of Allah. Therefore, I'm sure you notice it, and I notice it when you're going through these motions and you're saying these words, you become de-stressed. The stress starts to dissipate. And any stress that you suffer, any nervousness, any anxiety that you're suffering from dissipates. It just goes away. So you might have felt really tense before the prayer, but within those 5 minutes or so that you spend, and I do suggest if you're going to do, say, 4 rak'ah, of say Dhuhr or Isha, then certainly, or Asr, then certainly spend the maximum time that you can. If you haven't got anything, really lined up that you've really got to rush for, then choose a slightly longer surah if you know them, and if you don't, then memorize one, okay? And spend a good 5, 6, 7 minutes rather than 3 minutes and rushing it and saying, okay, well, I've done it. No, that prayer is actually your medicine. So don't rush it. And as you finish your prayer, you will feel totally calm and peaceful. That whatever problem you've got hasn't gone away, but the impact on your body is to think calmly about it and resolve it with a calm and cool head, and asking Allah for His help to resolve whatever issues and problems. So you're talking about stress, that stress level is going to go down. So there's nothing better. You see, I sometimes say when many non-Muslims, they have a problem, they hit the bottle. When we Muslims have a problem, we should hit the mat, the prayer mat. And by doing that, we are resolving our problem. When we hit the bottle, meaning alcohol, of course, they are making the situation worse for them. The problem doesn't go away. It's just gone away from their heads. As soon as they're sober again, they still have to deal with the problem. So by praying rather than doing what they do, we are de-stressing ourselves and getting that extra, inshallah, barakah from Allah to resolve whatever problem that we have. So yes, very much so. When we do tawakkul ala Allah, once we've done all we can to resolve our problem, then quite simply, we are going to be much calmer and therefore less likely, and this is really important, totally relevant to what you talked about. We are far less likely to head downwards towards depression, because stress and these other issues, they push you downwards. And by doing your salah and by having tawakkul ala Allah and keeping yourself calm and not, and putting things into perspective. Sometimes, you might have a small issue, but because you concentrate and think about it so much, it presents itself as a much bigger problem. And therefore you lose perspective. When you lose perspective, that small thing appears big and therefore is more stressful to you. So by doing our salah, we reduce our stress and we reduce the possibility of becoming depressed. By reducing that possibility, you keep your spirits up. One of the biggest problems with these lockdown now, so we're in lockdown again for a month. One of the biggest problems that they've discovered is, of course, even children are having mental health problems. If all these children with mental health problems, say Muslim children, were just, taught to pray 5 times at home, those 5 daily prayers would remove any possibility of mental health issues. It would keep them busy, and in between the prayers, they would be doing, studying or watching a bit of telly perhaps, but relevant stuff. I mean, I think I mentioned it to you before. I've got a telly, but I don't have it connected to, to the aerial, but I do have broadband. So I'm in control completely of what I watch and for how long I watch it. When you put that television on, and it's film after film, program after program, automatic, 24 hours. And if it's adverts, and it just, you lose track of time. You absolutely lose track of time.
Yes, you have planned your day, and the prayer is coming. The daily prayer is a balance of the day, Like the Friday is a balance of the week, Hajj is a balance of a lifetime. So therefore, if you put the time of the 5 daily prayers and in between you do your work, everything, then if you plan, if you don't plan, you're planning for failure. Therefore, if you put the 5 daily prayers and make them a focus point, as I said, to relax and everything, and in between you do your things, you're sleeping, you're eating, you're drinking, you're working, you're watching, I believe you can get the best out of the day, what we think.
Absolutely. And in fact, you put your finger on it. If we were to see the 5 daily prayers as our framework for time management, that these prayers, they come first, and everything else, we fit it between the prayers. You will find that that's a balance between your spiritual and your material. It's a beautiful balance. If we say, right, these are the 5 daily prayers, under no circumstances am I going to miss them, even the Fajr one, because I mean, Fajr prayer nowadays is so easy to do it about 7:15, 7:20, or whatever, up to there. It's so easy to pray. We have no excuse missing it. If we fix those 5 daily prayers as the main things we're going to do in the day, and everything else, our work and our relaxation and all the other leisure things and whatever we're going to do, we fit them around those 5 daily prayers, then we are fulfilling that ayah of the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the purpose of our existence. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, I did not create you except you, meaning you humans and jinn, except for the purpose of worshipping me. And by making sure that the 5 daily prayers are our framework around which all the other material things that we have to do, work, and of course spending time with the family, kids, everything else is framed around them. And especially in these lockdown times, you will find you've got no time to be depressed. You've got no time to have any mental health issues. You simply don't have time for them because you're just busy. You're just busy throughout the day, even though you're not working.
MashaAllah. This about COVID-19, I was looking to a video when a daughter had a 90 years old grandmother with her mother, and she wanted to take her from the care house home.
I saw a video of that, yes.
And the police, because of the I think the law and regulations, they stopped this mother and her daughter, and I think they arrested the mother, and the daughter was doing the film as well. Now she's 90 years old, and if a family wants to look after their grandmother, now what do you think about the rules about this isolation and all these kind of things? Do you think that this elderly 90 years old should stay in the care home because she's a risk? She's a risk to others, and other people are a risk to her.
There's some health issue, definitely. For those people who say COVID-19 is all a hoax, and it doesn't exist, and it's just a bit of flu and stuff. People, I know people who've had it, and some of those people have become very, very ill indeed, especially those who are a bit overweight and those who are a bit, over 60 or whatever.
Yes.
So anyone who thinks it's a hoax doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, and they need to stop this nonsense with all these conspiracy theories and what have you. Whether it was is a natural thing, it was created, whether it was manipulated once it came about, I mean, so far as we're concerned, we need to follow one principle. La darara wa la dirar. Do not, as the Prophet ﷺ said, do not harm yourself and do not harm others. So we make sure that we are taking maximum precautions to protect ourselves from any harm. And that, of course, in the context of COVID-19, that we are keeping our social distancing. We know this is a virus which is highly, highly infectious. This is the main main difference between COVID-19 and a flu, is it's highly infectious, much more than the flu. And that's why, so long as we wash our hands regularly, especially if we have, and keep your distance, no handshaking. I mean, this is normal for me. Even now, even after, 7, 8 months, whatever it is now, of this COVID-19 arriving in Britain, still I have people wanting to shake my hand. And all I do is that. Assalamu alaikum. I just give them my elbow. And then they realize I'm not going to shake their hands. Or sometimes they try to hug me and say, no, sorry. And I mean, that's the reality. We can't say it's all a hoax, like some people, rather foolishly really are saying. So we take maximum precautions and not to harm ourselves. Keep your social distancing. And when you're close to somebody, wear a mask. Because as we talk, of course, saliva particles are going out of our mouth. We don't see them. But if you just put your hand in front of your mouth, you can feel it. You can see, you'll see, you can feel some of the saliva coming out or in breath and stuff. And then you know that, when you're close to someone, you wear a mask. If you're at a distance, I see people, sitting in cars or driving all by themselves. There's nobody else in the car, and they've got a mask. And I'm thinking, why are you wearing a mask for when you're all alone in the car and there's nobody else with you? It doesn't make any sense. People going overboard. Sometimes walking in the streets, wearing a mask. There's nobody else around. Why are you wearing a mask? You're just, reducing the amount of oxygen going down into your lungs. But when you're close to people, indoors, yes, that's when the conditions are much more favorable for a transmission, quite simply. And therefore, you just take that extra precaution of wearing a mask. And remember, wearing a mask is not to protect yourself from the virus. It's a strange thing to say, but wearing a mask does not protect you from the virus. Why? Because the virus is far too small to be stopped by your mask. It's going to go
filter, yes.
It's going to go right through it. So what is the purpose of the mask? So that if we cough or sneeze, or we're talking or shouting or whatever, the saliva coming out of our mouth does not harm somebody else. It catches your sneeze or cough or saliva, etc., that could infect others if you've got it. That's the purpose of the mask. It is not to protect you, but to protect others from you. So when you're close to someone, that's where you've got to be careful that there's no transmission.
And the other thing as well, Manchester University, they fenced actually over the whole of residence of universities as well, and they apologize for that.
Yes.
And do you think that is it right for prevention is better than cure to put that kind of things as a to prevent the spread of COVID-19 among students? I think I heard that there was one from the MMU, he passed away. I heard, I think, one death.
Yeah. But, look, every year, if you look at the deaths of students, is it any higher, than any other year? Just because a student these days passes away, maybe they had COVID, and a student is more likely to have it because a lot of these students are completely irresponsible. They're having parties, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, it makes no difference. They because they know that they are less likely to be harmed by the virus because they know that they don't care and they act very, very irresponsibly. And so they're still having parties and stuff, and sometimes they're having parties inside. And of course, if they're giving it to each other, then they're going home, to parents or to coming into contact with other people, and they're passing it on. So they're being very selfish and very irresponsible. I was just reading, was it yesterday, day before yesterday, that there was a shisha cafe, and you know who goes most of the shisha cafes?
Yeah.
It's mostly Muslims, Pakistanis and Arabs and others. And there was a whole group of them inside there, almost like partying and what have you. Crazy, absolutely crazy. And of course, the police raided the place, quite rightly, because they're breaking the law. They're not supposed to be there. All these shisha cafes and stuff should be completely closed. So we have a lot of irresponsible people, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, especially young people. And so I can understand the action of the universities, although they realized and accepted what they did was wrong. They shouldn't have done that. And in fact, many of the students started tearing down those barricades and the fencing, and then the university dropped them anyway. So yeah, I mean, look, society's in a mess at the moment, and we've had 6-7 months of lockdown, and people are generally, they've had enough. They're tired. It's 8 months now.
And part of this COVID-19 now on its effect on the economy. Do you think that the small businesses will survive this 4 weeks again before Christmas?
Depends on what the nature of the small business is. If it's non-essential and they've had to close down, and obviously, laid off the workers, it's going to be tough for them. It's going to be very tough. I mean, the government has said, okay, until March, we'll furlough you. We'll give you, I don't know, is it 70, 80% of your wage and stuff. Still, that's going to be difficult, because if they're, I don't know, if their income is only going to be 80% and the business has got to give them the extra 20%, if that, I think it's roughly like that. If the business is not making any money, how are they going to pay them? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm afraid, especially non-essential businesses, they are going to go down, and thousands of them are going to go down. Pubs and restaurants, unless they're takeaways. Takeaways are all right. So some businesses are going to do really well, and others are going to go completely bust. Online stuff is going to do well. So it would be, right and proper for every business if they can operate online, because the government has said click and collect services are okay. So you just go online, pick whatever you want, and then go and collect it from one of the places.
Or order it to be delivered to your home.
Or order it to do, yeah, absolutely. So, there are ways around it. People have got to be smart. They've got to get smart if they want to survive. Alhamdulillah, my own, teaching business, education is not affected. So I'm continuing as normal, but there are some parents who are not happy about sending their children to my college, and therefore that's absolutely fine.
I think that's open up because the government is putting a consultation paper about homeschooling.
Yes.
There's a consultation about those people who do homeschooling, and they are looking at it because it might actually increase on this pandemic and how many parents want.
Yeah. I mean, there's no, look, if teachers start going down with COVID because of the children, and, there's no social distancing for the children, which I think is completely crazy. But if the teachers refuse to come to school for fear of catching it, and they may have vulnerable, parents, those teachers at home, and they don't want them infected. Maybe the children's parents might be vulnerable with diabetes and all sorts. You know how many of our people have got diabetes, and other health issues. So, you know, if a lot of or teachers say, "That's it, we're not coming in," then they will have to close the schools. I mean, children can't be taught by themselves, and they need teachers. So, you know, we could potentially head for total disaster with and therefore, as you said, there'll be a massive rise in homeschooling. But of course, the reality is not everyone can homeschool. I mean, you have to, you know, there's about 8-9 subjects. How many parents can read up on 8-9 subjects and then teach their children? Or maybe they can have online lessons from teachers. Maybe that could be set up. I mean, I have online lessons with my students, and it's not like ideal. I prefer my students in front of me. But you know, if that's not possible, then you know, online is the backup. So there are ways around it. You know, it's not completely hopeless, but with Brexit coming and this second spike, now we don't know how long it's going to last. They're saying at least until March, and that's definitely going to have a really bad impact, especially on unemployment. It's going to shoot up. So now, you know, with the government already having borrowed $2 trillion, pounds rather, you know, for the first, I don't know how many months, 6 months or so, the government is simply going to go into further and further into debt. And of course, where's it going to come from? Our taxes. Our taxes will rise, giving us less money to spend. And if we've got less money to spend, we're not going to be spending it on anything we don't absolutely need. And therefore, more businesses will go bust because they rely on us to spend. So the only businesses that will carry on doing well will be like Amazon, food, you know, food businesses, possibly some clothing, but a lot of people will probably just say, you know, I don't need to buy it, so I won't buy it unless they absolutely have to. So and online education, etc. So online businesses generally will be fine so long as they don't need too much of a labor force. But there's or anything that relies on, you know, like the hospitality industry, your restaurants and laundries and all these other places, which maybe the government may not feel is essential, and they're going to go bust, you know, and they can't go online. And manufacturing can't go online. Yeah, you know, people who can who are on the in front of the computer. Well, okay, they can be on the computer at home. If there is a phone service, okay, they can phones can be redirected to, you know, your home phone. So those, yes, they can work from home, but a lot of people are going to go bust. And the government is going to go further and further into debt. And as Brexit hits us hard, what's going to happen is that international prices are going to shoot up because and it'll become much more difficult for the British manufacturers to sell their stuff abroad, because, you know, most of the trade is with Europe, with the EU, and they will put their tariffs. Possibly they'll put their tariffs up, because definitely you can be sure that the EU will make it as difficult as possible for Britain to make sure that no other EU country goes its own way. Otherwise, Europe will just fall apart. So they have to make an example of Britain. If you leave the club, you're going to be worse off.
Right. And now let's move to the item 3, I think, about MEND, Muslim Engagement organization, who every month of November, they start this Islamophobia Awareness Month. And one question which is very important to start with is the definition of Islamophobia. And does this COVID-19, even they put some reports about, you know, at the beginning of the the lockdown, when a lot of the Muslim doctors, they caught it and then they passed away. May Allah bless them and give them forgiveness, inshallah, give them the highest position, the Firdaus al-A'la in paradise. And of course, they were talking about this COVID-19 will be affecting more I think the British ethnic minorities and all these kind of things. And they put a report about Islamophobia regarding that, and of course other things as well in different places, in workplace, in everywhere. And do you think that, first of all, do we agree on the definition of Islamophobia?
Well, the original definition was essentially to the fear or hatred of Islam and Muslims. Okay, that was the original definition that was put forward. Then was it last year, I believe, the
all parties.
Sorry?
The all parties,
yeah, that's the all party the parliamentary group for Islamophobia. They and they comprise a lot of people and many non-Muslims as well, and academics and stuff. So this wasn't a little Muslim group that came up with this definition. I mean, there's a long definition. I haven't got it in front of me now.
Yeah,
but
yes, I have it. Yes.
I had to go on. I think Russian television. They rang me up and wanted to talk about this new definition, and I talked about it last year about this exact issue. And essentially, to sum it up, if Islamophobia is someone discriminates against you because they think you're a Muslim, there is something Muslim about you, right? So you may not even be a Muslim. You may be a Sikh, and they think that because they're wearing a turban, and of course everyone sees Bin Laden used to see Bin Laden with a turban, and they think that all Sikhs are also Muslims, and turban and beard. So the racists, obviously, because they're dumb, they don't know the difference between a Muslim and a Sikh. So a lot of Sikhs were getting attacked by these Islamophobes. So Muslimness, if you're attacked because of your Muslimness, whether it's hijab, beard, clothes, your color of your skin, anything that would possibly suggest to a person that you may be a Muslim and you're discriminated against on that basis, then that would be Islamophobia.
Right, yes, but this is, and there's expression of that. And of course, it comes from, some people say, okay, ignorance is related to, fear is ignorant to ignorance, and that brings prejudice and then violence and everything. But somebody said when I was listening to like a talk between faith representative, there was yesterday or before they launched, actually, they were in Manchester here. I think there was from Jewish religion and Sikh and Christian as well. And I think one of them said, I think the ignorance should not be what we call a factor in that, because most children are taught the 6 religion, RE, religious education, in primary and secondary school, are for Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, Hinduism, Buddhism. Therefore, he said there is more than that. But I was reading I think this is Jimmy Carter Center, and he said Islamophobia has become an industry. Therefore, people are using it for their own economical benefit. So do you think that the media itself is promoting Islamophobia because it can sell product through it?
Oh, without a shadow of doubt. Without a shadow of doubt. It is an industry. In fact, Al Jazeera did a very good documentary on this. I think it was a couple of years ago. And they came up with a figure of, they said, just in the United States, Islamophobia is a $270 million industry, annual industry. Yeah, that's how much money is spent on Islamophobia, spreading the fear and hatred of Islam in America every year. $270 million, and is rising. So, and you know, we can talk about France later on as well, because obviously it's all linked up with what's happened in France and Austria. But without a shadow of doubt, you know, to the whole area of Islamophobia, a lot of people are making a lot of money out of it. Definitely.
And the MEND, I think, they were urging the UK government to adopt the definition of Islamophobia produced by the APPG, All-Party Parliamentary Group, which we spoke about on British Muslim. And that definition is Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness and or perceived Muslimness, as you said it. And do you think that is true? That's true definition of that? Is it root in racism?
I remember, do you remember that Brazilian lad that was shot dead by the police in London because they thought he was a Muslim and he was running away? And they shot him dead. I don't know how many bullets they pumped into him. And then they found out actually he's not even a Muslim, but they thought he was. Why? Because he was brown and he kind of looked Muslim. That was a case of Islamophobia. Right? If a Sikh is killed because you know, people think that you know, he's wearing a turban and he's got a beard and therefore he's a Muslim, that would be Islamophobia. So yes, if I remember, there's two things actually that come to mind now that I'm talking to you about this. In Oldham, when the riots took place, and the Muslim youth who were involved in that, you know, they claimed it was racism as well as Islamophobia, and the two things are linked. The judge, I remember saying something to the extent that since most of the people that were targeted by the far right, most of the people were of Pakistani origin, and therefore of one particular race. Therefore, the effect of that is not just that the far right's attack on them was not just Islamophobia, that was racism, because they belong to a particular race. Pakistani equals Muslim. That's a race, you see? And so the two things are very much linked. And the second thing was a couple of years ago, I remember, I think, where was it? In Louisiana, a Jew was discriminated against. I think in a job that he had applied for, and he took the matter to court. And you know, the boss said, "Look, you know, Judaism is a religion. It's not a race, and therefore, you know, you can't have me under the race laws. You can't apply those." And the judge said, "No, because Jews are seen as a race. It doesn't matter whether they are or not, because they are seen as a race. Therefore, it's both, you know, it's anti-Semitism and racism at the same time. You can apply the race laws to this particular case, even though being a Jew that's a religion. So, you know, that precedence has already been set, that if somebody discriminates against you because you're a Muslim, race laws can be applied, because most Pakistanis are going to be Muslims. Or if it's an Arab, most Arabs are going to be Muslim. If it's Turk, most Turks are going to be Muslim. So that's a race rather than a religion. So race laws can be applied.
Right. Okay. I think we have, I think, to go to, I think item 4 is again about sex and relationship education. And I was reading about the early years foundation, which is in the 2 to 4 years old or before that. That's before they go to school. And they spoke about, the right of parents if an area of learning conflicts with your belief. Talk to your child early years provider if you think one or more areas of early foundation conflict with your religious or philosophical belief. They will tell you if you need to ask for an exemption, and if you get an exemption, your child won't have to take part in specific area of learning for 12 months. Ask for an exemption, write to your early years provider if you decide to ask for an exemption, but you must explain how your religious and philosophical belief conflict within an area of learning, a learning of goal of assessment, or your early years provider will decide if you can get an exemption or not. You will need to apply again after 12 months. Now, you are talking about this sexual relationship education. What is the rule about in the early years before they go to the primary school? In primary school, in the early years, like nursery and primary school, about sex education.
The law is very clear, even in this the new legislation, this RSC and RS relationship, health and sex education legislation. It's very clear at primary school level, from the age of 4, which is what you're talking about. If
I'm talking about less between 2 and 4. I think in the nursery they have a right.
Yeah, absolutely. See, it's all about parents knowing their rights, because if you don't know your rights, then people are going to trot all over your rights. They will tread on your rights, hoping that you don't know what your rights are.
I mean, the school and they will send you the policy, but I believe that they will not tell you if you want to withdraw.
No, they won't. It's not in their interest, generally speaking, and therefore parents have simply got to know. I mean, it's similar to homework. I remember when I was a governor at my children's school, primary school, I was asked if they said that yes, if parents ask for homework, then the teachers have to set homework. But if they don't ask for homework, then the teachers don't have to set it. So I asked the head teacher in one of our meetings, I said, have you told the parents that they have a right to request homework? And she said, no, we don't have to tell them. So the parents don't know that they have a right to ask for homework if the teacher doesn't set it. And the school, because it's not in their interest, because teachers, if they set homework, they have to mark it. And that's extra work for them. And they don't want extra work. So even though this is a right of parents, the teachers, the school will not tell the parents that this is their right, that they can request it. And so in this situation, again, if the teachers or the school feel that this is more work for them or that this is inconvenient for them, then they just, they'll just say to you, that's it, we don't have to tell you. But if you ask for it, then we have to obey the law. So basically what I'm saying is it's down to us to inform parents that they have this right and they should exercise this right. That's the reality.
Okay, thank you. You're listening to this show, A2Z show with Dr. Abdul Aziz and our guest, Asad Zaman. Of course, you can put your questions as well in the comments or whatever. We can deal them with next week show, inshallah. Now, let's move, I think, to the European scene and France updates, maybe. Turkey and France relationships. And maybe we spoke last time about secularism and its definition and its versions, French version, Turkish version, and and liberal secularism in Britain, all these kind of things. Now, what about France now after this popular movement about boycotting and divestment from France and everything? Does it have any effect?
Well, it definitely it will have an effect because especially now with with the COVID situation throughout the world, all businesses are going down, and of course, the biggest economies are going to suffer the most. Naturally, the biggest economies will definitely suffer the most, and of course, France is it the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world. So, without a doubt, the French economy is going to be hit hard if there is a boycott of its goods. So this is why I was listening to the. I listened. I don't know if you listened to or watched the whole of the Al Jazeera interview with Macron. I just watched it before I came on air, and he looked very, very worried that if anyone was going to have a economic boycott of France, especially in these situations, as I said earlier. So the point really is, look, you're talking about, you mentioned secularism and France, and the situation of Muslims there, and you're yeah, okay, I can see you again. Look, see what is happening in France. The situation in France is this. You have a population of about 67, 68 million. About 6 million of them are Muslim. That makes it about 10, almost 10%. Yeah, some people will say it's more than 10%, but it's around 10%. That's a large, that's 1 in 10 French men and women are Muslims. That's a pretty, significant number. Here in this country, we're only about 5%. And the population is, we're only about, 3 million out of a population, again, similar to France, about 65 million. So what's happening there is, on the one hand, you've got the immigration element, but you've got more, apparently, from what I've been hearing, and you probably know the situation of France better than I do, being of Algerian origin, and Algerians, they speak better French than they speak Arabic, if I may say so.
Yes, so yes.
Yeah, that's my experience with Algerians. They speak better French than Arabic. So that's the reality. More, you have an increasing number of Muslims there, 10% already. The population, the birth rate of the white population is about just over 1 child per family, which is very, very low. You need 2.2 children per family to maintain your population. You go below 2.2 children per family, or 2.1 children per family, and your population goes into decline. And of course in the richer countries, better you have better diet, better medicine and exercise and all the rest of it. The old are not dying. So think about the situation, and this is in the whole of Europe, not just France. You have an increasing number of people who are over 65. Yeah, because they're not dying, they're living up to 90, 95, 100. Before, it was like unthinkable, somebody living up to 100. Now it's very normal, people living up to 100. But who's going to support them? The state has to support them. So it's a huge amount of burden, if you like, on the state in terms of the National Health Service, in terms of pensions, and all the rest of it. And of course, the older you become, the more illnesses you have, and therefore the more dependent you become on the health service of the National Health Service. So it's a big, big chunk of your overall budget. you have fewer and fewer young people being born. So the youth population is declining. And then you have, 6 million Muslims whose birth rate is probably about 3 children per family, maybe 4 even. So it's more than twice the population, the white population of France. And so they're saying in 40, 50, 60 years' time, these people will be not 10%, but maybe 30, 40% or 50% even. Yeah. And so they're worried that their highly, their culture is going to be changed. Remember what France went through. The Catholic Church had a huge influence on France. And what the French people did was they separated. They threw the Catholic Church out of power, locked the church up, locked Christianity up, or the Catholic faith up in the church, and said, you stay there. Interestingly, Turkey did the same thing with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. They did exactly the same thing when they toppled the Khilafah, Ottoman Khilafah. So by separating state from church and locking the Christianity up in the church and saying, okay, there must be no influence. There must be no influence of the church or on how the state is run. So that's the background. So they have this very, very extreme form of secularism. Yeah. Is it laicite? What's the French word?
Laicite.
Laicite, right. They have a very, almost you could say, a pure form of laicite. The whole of the West is secular liberal, but the French, they seem to be really at the more pure end of laicite. So they really are determined not to allow, never mind the Catholic Church. Now that, remember, these laws were like 1905 when there were no Muslims. So now they see more and more Muslims, and they are expressing their faith through their hijab, through their prayers, through their beards, through the clothing, etc. So they're saying, hang on, this laicite is under attack. This, very powerful principle of ours is now seriously under attack.
But we talk about this, about laicity, and then they start interfering with we have the French Revolution based on liberty, equality, fraternity. Yeah. Therefore, the actual individual freedoms, when you go and start talking, and you should not give your. I like the Turkey, when President Erdogan spoke about secularism in Turkey, he said you should keep your distance the same from all religion. Of course, if Turkey is its character is Islam and Muslim, so you keep that characteristic. And France, if it's Christian, you should keep that characteristic. But why you have to interfere in the individual freedom, what to wear, what to clothe, and what to?
This is the problem now, you see, and the whole of Europe is looking at France as to how it's going to hang on to its secular culture, especially when. So what the French have done is say, okay, yes, we've got freedom of religion, but you don't mess with the state. The state must be pure of any religious influence. So hence, if you look at their logic, I mean, we don't accept it, but if you look at their logic, any state institution, whether it's the schools or council or whatever, you cannot express your faith within those buildings. That's how they're trying desperately to hang on to their anti-religious sort of flavor within their country, you see. So this is what Macron was saying when I listened to him carefully. He said, look, this is our law. We are secular. We don't want, we're not anti-Muslim. We're just basically anti all religions. Okay. Our identity is Christian. Yes. But so far as the laws of this country are concerned, we are secular. We don't respect any religion. We don't care about any religion. And therefore we have the right to mock any faith. We have the right to caricature any faith. And we don't care if you're offended. Why? Because that's the nature of secularism. We don't care about God. We don't care about your books. We don't care about your prophets.
There is no sacred thing.
There's nothing sacred. Absolutely. That's the whole point of this pure form of secularism. Now, interestingly, and that's why, you know, the hijab, if a woman wants to become a teacher in a state school, then she can wear the hijab outside of the school on the streets. But as soon as she enters a state building, she has to take it off. So she can't teach with a hijab on, because that hijab for them is a symbol of religion. You see, and they don't want any symbol of any religion being practiced within anything that belongs to the state, because a state is anti-religion. It's secular. So this is a desperate attempt by France to keep its secular values, because they can see with the increasing Muslim population, and Muslims, they seem that I've not been to France for a long time now, so I've been there 2-3 times, but once in the 80s and I think once in the maybe 90s I might have gone, but I think it's once or twice I've been. Certainly when I went there, you know, back in the first time was I think 86 or 87 I went. It was very sad to see mostly the Algerian, North African Muslims, their state. It was really, really bad. It made me feel very sad indeed. I thought, you know, we Muslims in Britain were were in a poor state. But when I went to see the Muslims in France, I thought, my God, we are so organized and so firm on our faith compared to what I see with the Algerians and the other North African and other Muslims there. It was a very, very sad situation. And I remember going we were crossing over from France into Spain. I remember we went by road with the Palestinian brother, and we went, I think, from Clermont to Perpignan, which is on the border between France and Spain. And was it in Perpignan or Clermont? Is one of them. We got a bit lost, and then we took a wrong turn because we weren't sure exactly. We were looking for the motorway, and then suddenly we entered what you can only describe as a different time zone. It's like from a modern, sort of
developed
sort of France into, like, we just entered like 50 years or even 80 years, what France, the rest of France used to be. And that's when I understood the idea of a ghetto. It was a Moroccan ghetto. And it was a shock, absolute shock. It was like cordoned off from the rest of the city. It was bang in the middle of the city, but completely cordoned off. And this was your Moroccan quarter. But I think it was mostly Moroccans there.
Those talk about equality, that is more inequality than equality, isn't it?
Oh man, I was shocked. I thought, where is the equality here? And I saw a 12-year-old boy with a bottle of alcohol in his hand, drinking it in the street and half drunk, a 12-year-old. There were no laws. You could do whatever you like. And the general situation was really, really bad. I was shocked. really shocked.
And these inequalities and injustices, they cause problems and they bring insecurity, and those problems come up because
it's going to bring enormous resentment. Because those people from the ghetto, of course, they go outside and they see modern France, and they are in France, but it's like they're living 50, 60 years
world. Yeah.
You know, in the second or even third world within that city. So that's resentment, that's anger. You see, that's you could. I was angry seeing that. So what about those who are living there?
Yeah.
You see, so by this deliberate inequality, built into institutionalized inequality, they have built up a huge amount of anti-French resentment. And so you see the riots and, you know, regular riots there and all the rest of it. Those youth, they want to be treated as equals. They're human beings, but they're not treated as equals.
No, second-class citizen, isn't it?
Absolutely. You can see it. And so as they grow, you know, they want education, they want jobs, they want a decent, you know, standard of living. And if they're not getting it and are being openly discriminated against, well, of course, there's going to be resentment. And then there'll be a small minority of them who will be very, very vulnerable and susceptible to anyone who, you know, who whips them up and says, you know, why don't you carry out this attack or that attack, etc., against this state that hates you. So they become very vulnerable to such brainwashing from these you know, outside bodies, and that's basically what's been happening. But of course, in this particular case, these guys are from outside anyway. I think the guy came from Tunisia or something. You know, so he wasn't even born and brought up there like most of the French Muslims. Literally and sort of mercenary, you could say, possibly a mercenary who'd been brought in, and then
rebirth comers, and you know, if you compare, as you said, Turkey, Kemal Atatürk, when he moved Turkey from the Ottoman Empire to secularism, and now we have Tayyip Erdogan. He defines secularism as you should keep your distance the same from all religion, of course, protecting the characteristic of the country anyway. And do you think that
before we come to Turkey, let's just make another very important point, because we're talking about what's happening in France. So on the one hand, you've got all of this going on. You've got enormous inequality. You've got Muslims, basically North Africans, who are just very openly, you know, second-class citizens, locked up in their ghettos. And then on top of all of this, you've got Macron at 25%. You know, elections are coming up, and the only main opposition left, unfortunately, now is your Marine Le Pen of the National Front, or the whatever new name they've got now. They're not called National Front anymore, but we know who they are, far right. So she's on 25%. So what he's doing is what Sarkozy did, what Jacques Chirac did, and what all the other of these French leaders have done. They are trying to attract the followers of the far right. How do you attract them? By stealing the policies of the far right. That's what they're doing, by stealing the policies. Which policies? Anti-Muslim policies. So make life hard for Muslims, come out with all this anti-Muslim rhetoric. Look how much we stand for the Republic and secularism, that we're clamping further and further down on these Muslims. So why are you voting for Marine Le Pen when we are doing what you want her to do? Well, we're doing it, and we've got a better chance of running the country. So that's how they've been winning for the last maybe 20, 30 years, by stealing the policies, the anti-Muslim policies of the far right, and therefore neutralizing them. And so you put all of that in the mix, and you have a very serious situation.
Right. And what do you think about the attempt of Turkey and how they are getting on with this? And there is actually a big the Turkey-France relations are not very good. There is an exchange of
Turkey-France relations, you got Turkey-America relations, which are not good, Turkey-NATO relations. So Turkey seems to be falling out with basically the West as a whole. And the reason is very simple. Turkey, remember the history of Turkey a little bit, you know, for our listeners and viewers. When obviously Turkey, for I don't know how many 100 years, 600 years or so, had a khilafah, an Islamic, you know, empire, and then that basically fell apart after World War I. Okay, and so around 1924, the khilafah was abolished. Why? Because you had these secular Turks, like these so-called young Turks, who'd come in and said, right, we don't want this khilafah, and we want a modern secular Turkey. And this khilafah has held us back. Islam has held us back. And, you know, just as when the French Revolution took place and they locked up Christianity in the church, Mustafa Kemal said, okay, we've got to do the same thing. We've got to lock up Islam in the mosque. So separate state from religion. And that's what he did. When Mustafa Kemal came over, he threw out all Sharia laws, family law, foreign law, this, that, the economics, anything that had to do with Islam. He threw it all out and brought in Italian law to replace this law, German law, British law, French law, to replace all those aspects of Sharia law that had just been
Islamic
expelled.
law, yes, yeah.
Yes, right? So that's what happened in Turkey. And you know, the adhan was banned for 40 years. People were forced to do, even their salah, they could not speak it. They couldn't do the salah in Arabic. Salah can only be in Arabic. But he banned Arabic completely and forced people to do their salah in Turkish. Even their entire writing, I mean, that's even probably almost as extreme, right? Their entire script, we used to be written in the Arabic script,
Arabic language, yes,
right, was changed to Georgian or Western, British, you know, Western
Latin,
language,
yeah.
European, Latin, yes. So, and here's something else. This is the interesting thing about Turkey, which is that the army of every single country in the world, their number one duty is what? To protect the country. Yes, obvious. To protect the country from outside attack. Mustafa Kemal told the army, your number one duty is to protect secularism. Second duty is to protect the country. That's how extreme things went in Turkey. It was a complete opposite to obviously your Uthmani Khilafah. So that is the situation Turkey's been in, and that's why, you know, Turkey shifted so far towards pure secularism. That's why for Erdogan to be where he is a massive, massive change. Of course, everybody knows he's got an Islamic agenda. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows the background of Erdogan. You know, it's not hidden. It's open. And the West knows it. And in I think is it 23 or 24, when the treaty was signed and Turkey had to agree to abolishing the Khilafah for 100 years, that in the next 3-4 years is coming to an end. And therefore, Turkey will be, under that agreement, allowed to, you know, bring back the Khilafah if they want. And so that is the general feeling within Europe and the West as a whole, that Erdogan now is preparing for re-establishing the Khilafah. And therefore, you know, obviously him becoming the Khalifa, the Caliph, and of course, at the same time, he's positioning himself to be the leader of the Sunni world. Now, most of the Sunni world, I don't think will have a problem with that. But of course, you know, America has other ideas. America wants Saudi Arabia to be the leader of the Sunni world. And now there's a conflict between Saudi Arabia and Turkey, mainly because of this. Turkey is now increasing its influence. The Turkish economy is not doing too well, okay? And so when it comes to the economy, every country, every leader, you know, it's not normal and natural for them to be very concerned about the economy. And so wherever, you know, in the seas around Turkey towards Libya, for example, which Turkey feels it has rights to, it's digging and they've found, you know, drilling rather, and they've found a lot of, you know, is it gas or oil or whatever. And so, but the Greeks and the Cypriots, obviously Christians and part of the EU, they're not happy about it. France, which hasn't forgotten its own colonial legacy, likes to appear as an empire and likes to tell others what to do. They've had a very, you know, serious issue with Turkey, because Turkey is now trying to influence events, of course, in its own area. It's not going outside of its area. I mean, France has gone way outside of its area, in Mali and other places, to impose, you know, try to pretend like, you know, it's still an empire, and these are its colonial sort of satellites or whatever. But they don't like it when Turkey does it, you see. In Syria, Turkey's been getting involved. Why? Because whatever happens in Syria impacts Turkey. It's already got 3 million, you know, Syrian refugees. And when its own economy is so weak, it's only natural for Turkey to be very concerned about what's happening in Syria. And so it doesn't want more refugees coming over. So it's trying to stabilize the situation in Syria. But it means interfering with Western plans, with European and American plans, you see. And the West, they're not very happy with it. The Europeans are not happy with that. In Libya, again, now, Turkey has gone into helping the UN acknowledged government in Libya, right?
Yeah.
But the French don't like it. The United Nations have accepted that government, and Turkey's helping that government. But no, the French have got other plans because of the enormous amount of oil. The largest oil reserves in the whole of Africa are there in Libya. So those oil fields are very important for France and for Britain, for America, whoever's got the oil companies, etc. They've got an interest in that oil. And so the French and others and Saudis, and they've been backing Gaddafi's man, Haftar. So again, the fact that Turkey is getting involved in Libya, the French don't like it, because they've still got that colonial mentality. We're the big guys, we're the Europeans, who the hell are you? Don't mess with, you know, these international...
Regardless of the international law.
Yes. And so there's all this issue, and then of course the fact that Erdogan said, you know, about Macron, that he's got mental issues because of his anti-Muslim attitude. Macron, of course, did not like that at all. He was absolutely mad about it. He was mad at Erdogan for basically saying he's mental, he's crazy. So all of these things, yeah, it doesn't help, you know, help the situation sort of, you know, between France and Turkey. But the problem for Turkey is that France is extremely influential within Europe. And Europe looks to France for direction. And so France is whipping up anti-Turkish and therefore anti-Muslim as well.
But even the German weren't actually very happy about the French position about the Prophet's peace be upon him and the cartoons and the whole
But because the Germans, yeah, they've got a very large, quite large Muslim population themselves. They don't want there to be problems inside Germany. I mean, I remember, and I might have mentioned this to you, in 2007, I was studying Arabic in Syria. And I remember with the institution I was studying in, there was a conference that the German embassy organized in that institution. And it was called the Integration of Muslims in Europe. That was a title of that conference. This is 13 years ago. And the German ambassador was there, and he had a few other anthropologists and other people from the embassy. And he explained why they were so concerned about the integration of Muslims in Europe. Remember, this is 13 years ago. And the anthropologist, he said something which absolutely shocked me. I had no idea. He said, today, this is 2007, 1 in 3 children in German kindergartens, nurseries, kindergartens, are Muslim children. I thought, wow, that's a massive figure. 1 in 3 children in German kindergartens is a Muslim child. I thought, wow. Why? Because the Germans have stopped producing children. They've got 1 child per family on average, right? 1, 1.2, 1. It's around the 1 mark. They've stopped having children. Why? Because children, you know, economics wise, you'd rather spend your money on yourself than children. Western children, what happens? You bring them up, they're rude and all the rest of it. By the time they're 16,
not all of them, but
they're not going to look after you when you're old. You're going to end up in an old people's home. So what benefit is it to parents to have children? So they say, okay, stick to 1 child. Okay, we'll continue with this with our German race. We'll just have 1 child, but 1 child is not enough. As I mentioned earlier, 2.1 children per family is the minimum. Is it to keep the
population growth and everything? Yes.
To keep the equilibrium within the population. But 1. You're asking for trouble. Your population is going to go down. You're going to wipe yourself out. Why do you think Angela Merkel allowed over 1 million Muslims, refugees, over the last 2-3 years? Why? It's because those Muslim refugees were a godsend.
To make up, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to help. Look, everybody knows the German economy is very, very powerful. The most powerful in Europe, one of the most powerful in the world. I think it comes after, first it's, still America, China, Japan. And
China and America, not the other way.
Well, I mean, the economy itself is still more, I think generally is still the Americans have got an edge. From what soon the Chinese are going to take over. They're second anyway.
Took over, I think. Yeah,
well, maybe.
As far as export is concerned.
Yeah, I think it's the general GDP or whatever. So, and then you got the Japanese, and then you've got the Germans. So it's a very powerful economy, and of course a powerful economy which is expanding, especially within the IT sector, but within all sectors is expanding. If it expands, it means more jobs being available.
Yes.
But if you are not producing the children, the babies to take those jobs, how are you going to expand? It's going to have a direct impact on your economy. And of course, every year, more and more of them are retiring. So lots more are going out of the system. And then the system has to look after those people who are no longer producing any money because they're retired. So what about the pensions? Where do those pensions come from for all those people? And because of their health and everything, they're not dying. They used to be dying at maybe, 60, 65. Now they're dying at 90, 95. So you need a huge amount of income, the country does, in order to look after this, older population who are no longer productive. They are receivers, not producers. And then you've got a massively, remember we talked about France being in the same position. And then you've got, a young population, which is simply, you're not producing enough. So the immigrants, the Syrian and other immigrants coming into Germany was a godsend. This, alhamdulillah, we've got these young people coming in, and at least they'll keep our economy going. I'll keep our population going. But of course, there'll be a massive attempt now to integrate them so they don't end up taking over Germany. Already, I told you, 13 years ago, they were saying 1 in 3 children in German kindergartens is a Muslim child. That's going to go up to, maybe 2 in 5 or something. Very soon will be a Muslim child.
Okay, I think I think we have done this, but I might be coming, I think, to this, because this secularism and its definition.
This is going to go on. There'll be more attacks.
All right.
Yeah, now, there'll be more attacks. And
about Austria, updates after the, say, between inverted commas, a terror attack in Austria. And I was looking at a very important report made by European Union Terrorism Situation and Trend Report 2020. And part of it say mental health and terrorism. So the number of recent terrorism cases have raised the question of the mental state of the perpetrators or suspected perpetrators, and whether their acts should indeed be considered to constitute terrorism in the sense of politically motivated violence. In many cases, it's impossible to clearly distinguish acts perpetrated by people suffering from mental disorder. Some individuals suffering from mental disorder displays signs of radicalization, which are a consequence of their illness rather than their ideological conviction. Nevertheless, they might emulate modi operandi typical or often promoted by terrorism groups. Ultimately, multiple motives may underlie a decision to carry out an attack, and the intent to commit a terrorist act is only one of several factors to consider when assessing the threat posed by those individuals. And of course, we have that. Therefore, and they said some of that is the perpetrator action were the result of psychotic disorder, according to the judgment. His radical extremist thoughts were prompted by his paranoid psychosis, and this is for the attack in The Hague, the 5th of May 2018. And of course, they started looking at those individuals. Some of them, they were killed, therefore they cannot actually study them. But I think some of them which they have caught and they studied, they found that there is a mental disorder with those individuals who go and do this kind of terrorism and terrorist act as well.
This is a slightly complicated situation. Let's look at the situation that we have in, say, Muslim communities. You got two. You got born Muslims and you got converts. Yeah. Now, if you look, whenever they've described, whether it's the Belgium attacks or French attacks or even here, if they're converts, if you look at their background of these people who took part in these attacks, they had very serious criminal backgrounds, right? So they had criminal mentalities, okay? And they're young. Now, at the same time, put a lack of Islamic knowledge, lack of attachment, because they're new. So criminal mind, background, and very little knowledge of Islam. And then if they get mixed up with the people like Anjem Chowdhury and these other Al-Qaeda guys or others, yeah, what's going to happen? They're going to brainwash these young people who've come to Islam. They're thinking we're doing something good here, and they are being brainwashed into with very negative ideology. Yeah, look at the West and the anger and the anti-Islamic, anti-Muslim kind of policies that they see, and of course, you know what's happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen, and you know all these drone attacks, you know, in Pakistan and on you know in Afghanistan. I mean, the West is doing an enormous amount. And of course, what's happened in Syria. There's plenty to be very, very angry about. You're angry about a lot of stuff. I'm angry about it. We're not happy about what, you know, Bosnia before that. There's plenty that the West has done for us to be very, very angry. You and I, we can control our anger. But you get mixed up with these guys like your Al-Qaeda groups and your Anjum Chowdhury's Muhajirun group and what have you. And it's just anti-West rhetoric that they are hearing. And of course, this is going to affect them. And so they get involved with them and then, you know, they carry out these attacks. Then you've got your Muslims, okay, who again, brought up in the West. If you look at the background of these, like I remember the Belgian lads who carried out those attacks in Belgium. That was a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. When you look at their backgrounds, again, you know, these guys owned wine bars. They certainly weren't doing any praying. They were drinking. They were committing zina. They had no attachment to Islam at all. They may have been of Algerian background or Moroccan background or whatever, but these are just ordinary kids, didn't care about religion. They're very much victims, if you like, of the system. They were just growing up like all the other, you know, people growing up with all their secular liberal values, and to wind them up. And of course, if they're also suffering from discrimination as well, which they are, and you know, they feel like second-class citizens, then obviously you put all of that together, and you have you know, the wrong person talking to them and encouraging them about what Islam requires them to do, yeah, and jihad and what all the rest of it, and attack innocent people. These people are going to be, they're highly vulnerable.
Because they said that in this context, the increase in hate speech and threats, for example, against public figures and fake news on the social media may lead people who are mentally unstable or easily influenced to commit acts of ideologically motivated violence that could be characterized as terrorism.
And then on top of that, on top of all of this, you've got the counterterrorism people, and you've got in America you got your FBI. So what do they do? And what I'm saying is not from my mind. This is documented. There've been court cases. They will go into a mosque, for example, and they will spot somebody who's very vulnerable. They probably don't know much about Islam. They're young, and therefore pretty angry about what the West has been doing in Iraq and Afghanistan and what have you, and Syria. And they befriend them, and they tell them that, you know, maybe a white convert, I'm a convert to Islam, and you know, and then they start to groom them. These are undercover agents, FBI agents, yeah? They start to groom this young, vulnerable person. And then they start telling him things like, you know, look what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians. Shouldn't we be so angry? Shouldn't we do something about it? How can we as Muslims see all what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, and our countries are supporting Israel and do nothing? What are we going to say to Allah on the Day of Judgment? Surely we should take some action. You know, this type of talk. Imagine a young, you know, angry person, who Muslim, doesn't know much about his religion, doesn't know that what he's being, you know, is being groomed in the wrong way. He sees this white so-called convert he's just an undercover agent, and starts saying to himself, God, this guy is a convert, and he's so angry about what's happening to Muslims in Afghanistan or Iraq or Palestine. Why shouldn't I be angry? I should be angry as well. You know, he's just a convert, and I'm a born Muslim, and why aren't I so angry? And so he starts to get, you know, impressed by this undercover agent, winding him up and winding him up and winding him up and making him more and more angry. And then after a little while, when this undercover agent thinks, right, I'm getting this guy now, I'm befriending him, we're becoming close friends. And then he starts telling him, you know, we need to do something. We need to, you know, before we die, we need to prove ourselves as Muslims, as mujahid, as people who, you know, believe in jihad, and attack him and hurt him attack the people who are attacking our brothers and sisters or are supporting our brothers and sisters who are being victims in Iraq or Palestine. And so the grooming becomes more and more intense. And then one day the young lad says, well, you know, what can we do? And the undercover agent says, well, why don't we bomb this place, this bank, or this place or that place? And that'll show them, you know, at least we've done something to hurt them. And this poor young lad, you know, 21, 22-year-old, probably just, you know, and I'm thinking of one particular case which I read about. He was a physics graduate, 21-year-old. And this whole thing was in the Guardian paper. And he said, well, you know, where should we attack? I mean, we should, yeah, I agree, we should do something. But what? He says, well, attack these places. Well, I've got no access to anything. I don't have money. I don't have any explosives or whatever. And of course, this undercover agent, because he's FBI, he's got access to everything. He said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And so he provides him with everything that he needs to make a bomb, and gives him, you know, lots of, you know, cash and this, that, the other to carry it out. And of course, the media are being informed, and the, you know, the FBI know exactly what's going on because they're all wired. Everything, all these conversations are all, you know, obviously recorded. And as that person goes and plants the bomb, which is not going to go off because they've got the detonator or whatever, as soon as he plants it, the media have already been informed. They go, the media are ready, the police go, the FBI, whoever, go, and they arrest the person. Say, hey, look, we've stopped a terrorist incident. And then the media, they, oh, look, FBI done a fantastic job. They've just stopped a terrorist incident, and look how fantastic. Look at the threat that we have. So the threat is that much, not even, is way less than 1%. But they portray it as 20, 30, 40, 50%, 60%, you see? And then they go to Congress. So they've got all these praise from the media, what a wonderful job they've done to stop a terrorist attack.
Therefore, you're talking about the Jimmy Carter Center is an old industry, isn't it?
And so, yes, and so what happens? The media puts the knife into Muslims, Islamic terrorist, Islamic this, Islamic, extremist, fanatic. So Islam gets more bad publicity. And this guy and the FBI and all the rest of it, that's great. You know, they've done a great job. Then the FBI and of course CIA as well, they go back to Congress and say, look, we need more funding. Look, we've got a major, big, very serious threat from these Islamic terrorists, and we need more money. So during hard times, what happens? Their budgets get cut. So, and this is one of the reasons why they do it, because they know that this is one way to get more money rather than, you know, have job cuts and people lose jobs. So they go back to Congress. Look what we've done. The Congress have seen the media, CNN, Fox News, etc. And so they're convinced, yes, that the threat is a major threat. We should give them more money for surveillance and this and that and the other and recruit more people. And that's how it works. And you talked about Islamophobia being a very lucrative industry. Well, this is how it is. It works in their favor. And there have been many, many incidents like this, where undercover agents in this country, or especially in America, they have groomed vulnerable people to carry out attacks. And what I've just told you happened to them.
One thing, I think, because we just have just about 12 minutes to finish, the actual how to prevent, because the vulnerability of Muslims comes from unemployment, inequalities, a lot of things, family, big number in family, all these kind of things. So therefore, the idea how to prevent this kind of people being groomed to this kind of acts and everything.
One thing that the behavioral unit of MI5, when they were studying, they issued a report in 2006, June of 2006, if I remember correctly. They issued a report when they looked at these people who've been caught carrying out or about to carry out these terrorist incidents. They came to the conclusion that so long these people are vulnerable, if these people are vulnerable because of a number of factors, they've been grown up and stuff, but also because of their lack of attachment to their religion and lack of knowledge. So what they were basically saying was that if a person has a greater knowledge of Islam, sound knowledge, greater knowledge of Islam, and greater practice of the faith, of mainstream, not extremist stuff like with Marjaroon and what have and stuff, but mainstream stuff, then that acts as a barrier towards the extremist narrative. They're not going to be, if somebody comes to you or to me to wind us up to carry out a terrorist incident, we've got enough knowledge of our faith to know that that would be haram, that would be forbidden, that would be wrong. And there is no way we're going to do that. Do you understand? These youngsters, because of their lack of knowledge, they are vulnerable, and because of their lack of attachment to the religion, to Islam, they are vulnerable. So more knowledge of Islam and more attachment to the faith will actually prevent them from being groomed by these extremist elements.
Right. Okay. I think we come to this final one, I think, about world news, American election. And of course, somebody just sent me a post. He said, Washington is forbidden Biden. Huh?
Yeah.
It says it's forbidden on Trump now. So therefore, it is sometimes, I think now we need 270 to anyone to win the president, to be in the Washington D.C. and the president of the United States. But it does seem that I think the whole thing, there is a swing towards Biden from Trump. Do you think that the 10% will make it?
Yeah, look, generally in society, when, if you leave it to people, and that's one of the positive things about democracy generally. I mean, democracy has got serious problems with it, especially Western, secular democracy has got a lot of problems with it. And France is a classic example of the problems because, through the democratic process, they become more anti-Islamic and anti-religion. So, because it's a case of voting, and if people see you as a problem and Muslims are seen as a problem, okay, then whoever is anti-Muslim will get the vote. Basically, I mean, obviously there are other issues, climate change, and various other issues,
racism,
and COVID-19. And people are generally not happy with the way Trump has dealt with his COVID-19 or with the climate change. because these two are major problems.
And racism as well.
Sorry?
And it's about racism and all this.
Of course, race is created. Everybody knows he's very pro the white supremacists. Look, Trump doesn't have any values. Trump is about making money, right? Everybody knows that. But what he has done, because he's got no values, he's not a politician, he's got no personal convictions. He just wanted to be president. That's it. And his main concern is the economy. Well, so when it comes to, so obviously he needs votes. So he's identified 2 or 3 main places where he's going to get votes. One is your right-wing Christians, okay, who are basically waiting for the return of Jesus Christ.
Peace be upon him.
Yeah, they're waiting for him. These are your Christian Zionists, okay? Very hardcore, very extreme, and very influential. And there's at least maybe 40, 50 million of them, at least, in America. And all these TV evangelists, they're all part of that. And they are very influential. So he's decided, okay, whatever you guys want, I'm going to give it to you. You want me to be pro-Israel? I'll be pro-Israel. You want Jerusalem to be capital of Israel? I'll give you Jerusalem to be capital of Israel, which is what they want. And we can discuss why they want it in another program. So that's one of his base. The other base is your white supremacists. So, and he's always had that, him and his father, they've got a history of being white supremacists. And not liking those who are not white and American. So he's been appealing to them. So these 2 major parts of the US, he's been relying on their votes. Apparently, the Catholics, they were also very much with Trump. But why? Because of his anti-abortion and what have you, yeah? The so-called conservative values. But they realize that, hang on, abortion is important, but we can't just vote for this guy on a one-ticket issue, or we're not just one-issue politics here. He's got a bad track record when it comes to women, when it comes to race. And, racism is something that is a bad thing, for the Catholics. And because, he's got a bad track record on that, they've been moving away from him. So he's been losing a lot of support from those people who feel he's dealt with COVID very badly. He's dealt with race very badly. And he's dealt with the climate situation very badly. No matter what he says about fake news, most people are not stupid. And not everyone listens to Fox News. And therefore, thinks all this is all fake. And so he's had more and more people moving away from him on some of these issues. His main base, the 2 that I've mentioned, the Christian Zionists and the white supremacists, they'll stick to him no matter what happens. Why? Because he's their man. You understand? But what about the rest? The rest are, who are not part of that base, they are going to look at all these other issues as well. And I think, so the American people, it's not that they like Biden, they just don't like Trump. I mean, if you stood instead of Biden, I think they'd vote for you. This is the situation in America. It's not pro-Biden. Biden he can't talk. He's about, 77? He's an old man. He's been mostly staying indoors, hardly going out. It's not about Biden. It's anti-Trump. And that's where things are going in this election.
So therefore, we have to wait maybe, I think, another day or not 2 days, 3 days, or next week to get the official.
Trump, Trump is going to say, number one, I want a recount. Okay, so he's going to try and get as many recounts as possible to delay things, so he can stay in the White House a bit longer. Secondly, he's already done it. Okay, I don't accept this result. There's fake. Dead people have been voting. There's been a lot of voter fraud. All these postal votes, over 100 million people voted postally. I don't accept any of that. This is all fraud against me, just to steal the election away from me. He's going to do everything. He's going to take him to court, and he's going to try and hang on and hang on and hang on as long as he possibly can. He'll try every trick in the book to just hang on to the White House until there's nothing left to hang on to, and then he will go and, well, who knows what's going to happen to him.
Okay, I think that will be
money anyway.
I think it will be. I think next week we will see what will happen as well in America. I think India. I think we might cover it. I think we cover it maybe next week. But bonfire night, and the bonfire night. We hear too much noise now, even throughout the night now.
Well, very quick point on bonfire night for those who don't know. These explosions and stuff you're hearing and fireworks every year, 5th of November.
Right.
You see, was it 1601 or whatever it was, like roughly around 16th century. James, I think it was James I. He was the king and in power, and he was a strong Protestant. He hated Catholics, absolutely detested Catholics. And so he made life very difficult for all Catholics living in this country. And so a few Catholics got together, and Guy Fawkes is the name of one of the Catholics. And they thought, you know what, this guy is going to, he's making life very, very difficult for us. We're going to do something about him and this entire parliament, who backs him. So they managed to get some gunpowder, and they put the gunpowder in the basement of the House of Parliament. And they knew that the king would be there and all the MPs would be there, who were basically anti-Catholic. Just on the night that it was, I think on the 5th of November, when that all MPs are all there and the king's all there. I think they were about to blow up the whole place with the barrels of gunpowder, and they were caught. And when they were caught, obviously, they were burnt to death. And so that's where the idea of bonfire night comes from. Is they tied him to a tree or whatever, and they piled up, and they basically burnt him, and probably those who were with him as well. So Guy Fawkes was the actual name of the Catholic who tried to destroy the whole of the House of Parliament and the king, and to do away with them all, and got caught, and then he got burnt.
Wow!
So they celebrate that every year.
What is it? Right. I think we'll call it today. Thank you very much, Brother Asad Zaman, for all this, what we have done. And hopefully next week we will hope, inshallah, everything okay. We pray to Allah to cover and to give a cure to those people who have been infected. We have Brother Majdi Aqil, who is actually in intensive care. And other people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect and cure all those who are infected with this pandemic, COVID-19. And of course, we pray to, and may Allah send mercy and blessing upon all those people who lost their lives as well, and give their parents and their children as well patience and great reward. And until inshallah we see you next week. We say سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان في خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
Wa alaikum salam. And I will just